Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Kathy Gwyndon, and she is U.S. Medical Director at GE Healthcare. And we talk about how to manage up and have a successful relationship with your manager. So really interesting conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram, and check us out on MSL Talk Live on Clubhouse, which is the first Tuesday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Hey, Kathy, thanks for joining me. How you doing today?
I'm great, Tom. How are you? Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is great. I know, we've gotten to know each other just really through kind of the conference circuit, seeing you around, and we've kept in touch. And I think this is going to be a treat for everyone because I know you're awesome and you have a ton of experience, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Same. I would like to say you're awesome as well. I think the first time we met was at a DIA meeting.
Yeah.
And it's just been a great to follow your organization and have the opportunity to chat with you here and there. So thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. So why don't we start just with an intro, just if you want to introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you're up to, that sort of thing.
Sure. My name is Kathy Gwyndon. I've been in medical affairs my entire life in industry. I'm a registered nurse by training, career MSL, and been in the management gig for probably the last 5 to 6 years, managing a team of field medical experts, MSLs.
Awesome. And so I know I kind of brought this topic to you. So sometimes folks will come to me with a specific idea or a topic, and you and I were talking, and I had mentioned that someone came to me with the idea of how to manage up and have, to develop a more successful relationship with your supervisor. So, and I would really appreciate you jumping in and stepping in because I think this is going to be a great conversation. So let's start with, I guess, what does that mean? What does it mean to manage up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I'm not sure there's a perfect definition, but you know it when you see it, you know it when you feel it. And being a manager of a team, you manage your team, so you manage down, but you also have to manage up to the individuals you report to within the hierarchy in the organization, your direct supervisor, and even above him, in various leadership calls. And to me, managing up is number one, making my life easier and making my manager's life easier.
Yep.
And a lot of how I start to manage up is to learn about my manager.
Yeah. So start learning what the hot buttons are and what your manager is really looking for, what the expectations are, and then do what you can to keep your manager happy.
Exactly.
In a sense.
Exactly.
And so how do we relate that to field medical affairs? Why is it important for specifically MSLs? Because obviously that's what this podcast is about. Specifically MSLs and field medical affairs professionals to manage up. And what advice do you have for folks?
Yeah. So why I think it's important for MSLs is depending on your manager's experience, how they deliver goals for your team or metrics, I often find that's a big area where I manage up. So I have to educate them on quality over quantity, I think a lot of times, and how I can demonstrate activity of a field medical team without, you certainly can't tie it to sales, and without just call history, because, so that's a big part of my managing up from the first get-go of an MSL team is where are you at with goals for the team? If I set these goals, how does that resonate with you and your experience? So that's one area I find critical to manage up and gain an understanding initially right off the bat.
And what about, so you mentioned quality, which is so important nowadays. And anytime we talk about metrics, it's quality over quantity. And some companies do have more quantitative metrics than qualitative. But let's just talk about that for a second. So when we're talking about quality, or is it just performance, or how important is attitude and effort?
Yeah, great question. So let me just dial back in a sense. So quantity is important, and I do weave that in a softer way, right? I want to make sure I'm seeing activity.
Right.
And we're seeing activity. But I forgot your question, Tom.
No, so we were talking about quality and quantity, but also effort and attitude.
That's right.
As it relates to.
Yeah. So so that gets to it. So there's always quantity, but effort shows me that there's quality work going on. So if they're putting forth effort, and how I gauge that is through one-on-one communications with my team.
Yeah.
I can really have a great feel if this individual's comfortable with their goals, understands who they need to reach out to in the territory, understands meeting coverage, how to handle investigator requests for sponsored trials or investigator sponsored trials. Their effort certainly goes a long way and helps me to help my manager understand this is all of the activities this team has going on.
Yeah. Well, I think that, and that's my thing. I manage a team here, and there's two things that I look at. There's performance and there's attitude. Performance, if you're performing, I'm not going to give you a hard time. And if you are performing and you have a really good attitude and you come to work every day and you're ready to get after it, but you're also have this really great demeanor and you're really positive and people want to engage with you. Well, that's an intangible that means a lot, that I think just in that sense alone, you're managing up. You're making your manager's life better because you're checking off all the boxes that you need to. Am I oversimplifying this?
No, and that's the issue, right? It's there, it's nebulous. You know it when you feel it. You know when you're managing up. You know it when you're doing it. But I think attitude is a huge piece, right? If you're going to gain any equity with anyone in the organization, even your manager, it's showing up and having that can-do attitude.
Yeah.
And even, so, and part of managing up is learning how they react, right? So I've had managers who like to have a lot of fun, work hard, play hard. I've had managers that, they're more muted. They just want to kind of, know where we are on the team and interject with suggestions for what they think needs to be accomplished in addition.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you mentioned this before, but I think it's important to have an understanding of what the hot buttons are and what makes your manager happy. So thinking about that, how important is communication as it relates to this manage up concept?
Yeah, it's hugely important. You want to set up a regular cadence of communication, probably weekly, and if you don't need to talk, you can always cancel, but at least having cadence, because I find in situations where I don't have that cadence, I'm more curious. What is he thinking? Is he okay with the job I'm doing? Can I continue to focus and steer my team in this direction? I think communication is essential, and regular communication.
Yeah. And listening skills, right? Just really being able to not just listen, but pay attention to detail and what it is that's most important.
Agree. Yes, agree. And I find in this area, you also listen to email in a crazy way. There's tone. There's highlighting importance within the message. So a lot of verbal and nonverbal communication. I'm leaning in, listening for the cues.
So that's funny. So then everything counts, right? So email counts, text counts. Yeah. All these things count now. It's different, back a million years ago when we first started, and I'm not speaking for myself, but I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and in the
Same.
beginning, geez, when I first started, like there were still fax machines. We were getting resumes faxed to
Yeah.
us.
I remember MapQuest.
Yeah, MapQuest. So, we're in this digital age now where we can see each other on video, we can communicate via text and via email and all this other stuff. So I think there becomes a cumulative effect, right? That can play into all this, and we could probably use it to our favor, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. And I even think COVID has made the nonverbal communication that much more. I mean, certainly verbal, as we've moved to Zoom, Teams platforms to engage with our customers, our key opinion leaders. But, the getting them to the meeting with an email.
Right. So with that in mind, so as we start to look at and getting back to kind of the performance side of the equation,
Mhm.
obviously there's going to come a time where people are going to have their performance review, which is a really good opportunity to manage up and to have a chance to really connect and make sure that there's alignment and that communication as far as goals and metrics and objectives, all comes to the fore. This is a stressful time for folks. So how do you advise people get ready for their performance review?
I like to think of it as a fluid process. So I have weekly one-on-ones with my team, and I'm always checking with them, usually one part of their global goals. How are you doing here? How close are you getting here? I encourage them to let me know when they're getting stuck somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are, if they are, other team members are, so we can, mitigate that together. But it's a kind of an ongoing performance review. It's really not just that day. They should go in, for my team, they kind of go into their performance review annually, knowing where they kind of stand, just based on the conversations we've been having throughout the year.
That's because you're a great manager.
Thank you.
Well, but I mean, I think there's situations where if you're having one-on-ones each week and you're that dialed in and you have a really strong understanding of maybe the strengths and weaknesses of your team, well, you're on top of it. But what happens when you have maybe the manager or the scenario or the MSL that is only meeting with their supervisor once a month? And then they have to prepare. I mean, I think that's a different scenario.
Yeah, that is a very different scenario. Then they're managing up to their manager. So I think, some of the same things apply. What is important to that manager? How do they demonstrate that they're getting the job done, making things easier for their manager? Do I have to remind you to do an expense report? I mean, that's no-brainer stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that, it's so funny. I really feel like that's the one like kind of chink in the armor of MSLs is that it's so often that comes up. Well, I'm really not good with the paperwork side, or I'm not great with my expense reports. And my manager's always on me to get my expense reports in. So obviously that's a real area that if that's a requirement and that's something that really gets, up in the craw of your manager, then doesn't it just make sense to just get it done?
Totally agreed. And it's sometimes the communication, helping them understand. It's not that I'm a stickler. It's
Yeah.
If you give me 6 months worth of expenses, I have to go through all that. It's
Right.
just, courtesy.
Yeah, no, it is. And I know it's easy for me to say. I don't want to insult or get MSLs mad at me for saying, "Hey, just do it," because I know that
Right.
pain.
Same.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I know.
I try to make my team understand why why it's important, because then I can get on to other things and help them do their job, help our team excel. If I have every other week expense reports, and it's very easy to quickly go through that and check that box off for the week.
And I'll tell you, and it almost, I mean, I'm sitting here again, I'm oversimplifying it, but it's almost like put yourself in the other person's shoes and think about what are they tasked with? What do they have to go through? And what are, what's, my efforts and what I'm responsible for doing, how does that affect their job? Am I making their job easier? Am I making their job harder? If I'm making their job harder, how do I fix it?
Right, exactly. And I think what you've helped me understand in preparing for, this discussion, everybody's managing up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all report to somebody in some way, shape, or form. And we all have to kind of take a step back, I think, sometimes, and just say, okay, how do I make this person's life better? Or how do I impress upon this person? And because we all have that responsibility to, to make our managers' lives easier, but also to protect our own performance review and our own, the opinion of the folks that exist above us, so to speak. Again, kind of dumbing it down, but I think it's pretty basic stuff.
No, I totally agree with you. You're right on point.
But now how about when we look at, because you mentioned COVID and that's always something that comes up and it's something that we are still in and we're still dealing with, and it's very real. And what COVID taught us was that at any point in time, things could change really drastically. So what happens in an ever-changing dynamic world, and what advice do you have for MSLs that are still trying to make their managers happy in that scenario?
Flexibility and communication. Those are so important. So we all had to be flexible, but we also had to communicate. Like when New York City was shut down in the beginning of the pandemic, my MSL, she communicated with me and shared with me, I can't engage these guys scientifically right now. That it's rude. Think about this. And we both, made realistic goals. Well, maybe you can use your expertise and help build on the team, build up activities like insight collection with the team. Let's train them up better on insight. So let's have additional training. So flexibility, adaptability, and communication.
That's great advice. It's so funny. I do these podcasts, and there's always people that reach out to me after, and they let me know what the takeaways are. I kind of think that that's the soundbite: is flexibility, adaptability, and communication. And I think it almost really it applies to this whole conversation, not just COVID. I think that if you can work on that, I think just that piece of it alone would make your manager and your manager's managers happy.
Agreed. And you know what? You may think, well, I don't know how to manage up. How do you talk to your spouse? How do you talk to your children when you need them to get something done?
So you're doing it. You're doing it every day in other walks of your life. So that's why it's important to pay attention to it. Well, this is not a reactive thing. This is a proactive thing. I think that's one of the other key points that we have to focus on, is that you can't really just be reactive with this, because then it's too late.
Yeah.
This has to really be a proactive thing.
Yes. Yeah, totally. When you're new to a team, it's important to establish a good communication practice with your manager, learn their hot buttons, as we were talking earlier.
Yeah. How is your team doing? Obviously, with it's June, right? We came through, and we're hopefully turning the corner on COVID. Some companies are getting back to travel. Some are still totally virtual. How are things going with you and with your team?
Again, it's that flexibility, adaptability, and communication. I think, they're starting to understand where they may be able to travel to meetings. For instance, there's a large breast cancer meeting, San Antonio breast cancer meeting in December, which I believe is both virtual and live. So we're starting to make decisions now. Do we have live interactions, or do we keep things virtual? So and what does our company think? What do they have to say about what we can and should not do for the safety of the whole organization, this worldwide global company? So it's flexibility, adaptability. Let's say we plan virtual and then 3 months ahead, we decide to pivot. We have to be flexible and think ahead. And
there's a lot of pivoting going on. I mean, it's every day is a new pivot. I was speaking to a client that is struggling with the dilemma of email and email communication with their MSLs and their KOLs. How do you view email communication? I'm curious because now this is in my head now. So I'm just curious what your opinion is and how you guys go about the that means of communication with KOLs.
Right. I think because we can't drive and go in and see the admin and get a meeting on the books, which I think now, and they're very busy and everyone's trying to reach their KOLs virtually with Zoom meetings. You have to manage up to them. Is there something that you have to find that hook? Yeah. How can you get them to respond to your email and go for that meeting?
Yeah. So and it's funny and I should have probably been more specific too. Some of my clients don't allow email communication at all. They don't want to get into it. They don't want to open themselves up to any issues, compliance, legal issues. Some do. Some do it a lot more than others. Some only do it as a means of gaining meetings. Is that more what you guys are using it for, an email almost to just, request a meeting?
No, we're having, and COVID really has allowed more of this. It's important to have, conversations. Right. So it's easier for that clinician to give me information, substantive information. We are collecting it. I think where you have to be careful is if there's an adverse event, then you need to make sure that that's, reported up the chain. So everyone has to be up to speed on compliance. But I've actually never worked in an organization that has required me only to use email with clinicians for meetings only.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing, and I'm becoming a student of this, and I'm asking a lot of people, and that's why I wanted to talk about this a little bit and we're venturing off the main topic, but I think it's an important part of the conversation because I think a lot of people are, I'm not going to say confused, but concerned as to how to use this. It's obviously a very important tool. I think the MSL Society came out with a survey at some point in time last year, and 82% of KOLs said that they prefer email as one of the primary means of communication. So it is a thing. It's definitely a thing. And everyone's using it, but to what extent and to what degree really, really varies. So that's why I think it's an important conversation. But and I'm stretching. I'm really stretching here, so bear with me. But because of the fact that has become so popular and because of COVID, I mean, does it get to the point where it really becomes more standardized in how it's being used and if it can be a part of your goals, objectives, or metrics?
No, I was going to go there. I'm glad you stretched and went there because that's part of the managing up, right? I mean, is that an interaction? Is a substantive email conversation an interaction? I would argue yes. Not, can we have a meeting? That's not an interaction. It's then, you have the communication about something over email. And I feel safe in the sense that I make sure that my team understands the compliance of the organization. I usually have regulatory and compliance present to the team at least once a year, just to keep it fresh in our minds. But yeah, I think if they're attuned to compliance, it's important. It's so key to our ability to engage, especially in the era of COVID, that there is definitely managing up there. Are you comfortable as my manager with that?
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too. What better way to manage up than stay out of trouble? So I think almost as important as anything else that we've discussed today is that if you can first of all, know the rules of the road, the rules of the team, the rules of the industry, whatever it might be, and stay out of trouble and make sure that you're not getting yourself in trouble or your manager in a difficult spot. So I know that this seems really kind of stupid. I think that that's a really important piece of this.
Right. Definitely. Knowing the rules is key.
Well, that's a future episode. We're trying to, I'm trying, a lot of people have asked, a lot of people have asked, Tom, we need another, primer on compliance. We need to cover that. So that's a whole nother conversation and a whole nother episode. But this was really insightful and really important. And this is something that I think I learned a lot from, but it's also, I think it just goes back to every single day we have an opportunity to just do a good job. And when the day's over and we're quote unquote driving home from work, which we don't even do anymore, but let's just say that we pack everything up, what could we have done better? What could we have done differently? And maybe it becomes a matter of not just thinking about our own performance, but we have to think about, well, what should I or could I be doing to help my manager and make my manager happy? And
exactly. Great summary. And, this has been educational for me as well. So as much as I've imparted some helpful information for my colleagues, just hearing some of your thoughts has been, I just like you just said, at the end of the day, thinking, did I make my manager's life easier today?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that all the folks that work for me are listening to this right now. Oh, for selfish reasons. But no, Kathy, you were great. I really want to thank you for coming on. This was a great conversation. And we definitely have
the opportunity
again sometime. And so when am I going to see you at a meeting? Like, when are meetings coming back? When are we going to be able to start getting out there?
I'm hoping fourth quarter. I've seen a Northeast regional meeting go live today. Yep. And of course, the large San Antonio Breast Congress will have live and virtual. So I think it's coming.
Oh, that's going to be great. I really I love to travel. I love to see everyone. I love to get out there. So hopefully it'll happen this year, to your point. But I think we're going to really get back into a normal routine in 2022.
Agreed.
Yeah. But whatever the case, I'm looking forward to seeing you out there.
Same here, Tom.
Awesome. Be well. Talk to you soon. Thanks.
Sounds great. Talk to you soon, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future. And feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.